about to embark on a magical, well, kind of cool journey with that car right there. And it starts with analyzing the race against the Hoonicorn. I do firmly believe that there's a chance I could have beat it, not in that circumstance, but with a little bit more practice, a little bit more seat time, and a couple little tricks up my sleeve. This video took a little while because I was waiting on some of the footage from inside the car. Of course, with Christmas and all of the winter craziness, things kind of slow down. We have the raw footage from inside the car, and you can watch each race, and you can make fun of me as much as you want. I don't care at this point because I doubt anybody else could have done better. That said, how would you have done it better? Watch the video and let me know what you think you could do to improve that car up there. Let's start off with the rules of the race. Well, I didn't care about the rules of the race because I was there just to simply live. I wasn't even trying to race. I was just trying to not make a fool of myself. I believe it's a best out of three sort of situation. Well, I had never driven the car and I wasn't going to push it to the absolute extreme and break the car off camera. Say I broke the very first time, there wouldn't even be a run for YouTube. So basically in that sense, I already lost. And of course, that run includes the infamous hood flying off. If you got what that looked like, here you go. Let's take a look at it from the shifting standpoint. Here are the logs, and here's what happens in real time. As you know, this 3-rotor under here has made about 980 horsepower to the rear wheels, and I've piloted that car using every bit of that power. This car, on the other hand, at the very lowest boost setting is well over 1,000 at all wheels. So I'm already way more power than I've ever driven in my entire life. I got to deal with it. One of the other major things that happened in that run, I started pressing the clutch. If you've ever done any sort of concealed carry permit sort of training, weapons training, you learn that the human body turns into a very on-off sort of machine, that you point, you pull the trigger, you don't half-ass things, it's 100% on-off. You squeeze, you let go, you drop, the clutch in this case. And that's exactly what happened when I was driving that car, is that my body turned into heart pounding out of my chest, clutch, in, gas, out. Until you've gotten some experience with it, you don't go in soft, you just go. I've never driven a dog ring sequential before, more specifically the dog ring. You do not engage the clutch other than for first gear. Since you're engaging it once, habits take over and then you engage it again and again for each of the gears. So in that very first run, I was still dealing with the fact I'd never driven the car before, and I was using the clutch. So then the second run happens, and this is where things start to improve. I still wanted to do a roll race because we had the hood fly off, so I wasn't at 100% with my first attempt. Might as well repeat the results, and that's where I already lost, is that I just wanted to make sure I could consistently do something. And that time, I stayed in the gas even more. Shifting faster, and one of the biggest problems shows its face right there. The gas pedal became my biggest problem when it comes to actually running the car at this level. My intention is to have a strain gauge shifter. What a strain gauge shifter does is when it feels you straining harder on the shifter, it knows to let up harder and harder until you get into gear. So that way you can slam gears and the ignition will retard, it'll back off, letting you go into gear and without losing boost and without losing much time at all. I started out losing almost half a second between each gear because I was actually letting off the pedal, which was causing the blow-off to go off, the turbo slowing down speed a little bit, and then you had to go back into gear. So I was losing boost. I never even had my chance to use my boost by gear, and the results showed for themselves. That said, the second run was actually pretty awesome, for me at least. You know, I'd never driven a sequential before, and that was the first time I didn't use the clutch and tried pedaling it as best as possible. So we've got almost all of the vials made, the vials of what we call Hoonicorn blood. That's the VR 2050 full synthetic that was used in the engine. You could literally take this to an engine lab, an oil lab, and analyze what's in it. I'll tell you right now, there's some glass in it. Engines don't run on glass. That'd be kind of wild if they did. But aside from that, you'll find that this has the amount of zinc and phosphorus, they commonly call it ZDDP, the correct amount for a high power rotary. So you should see about 1,400 to 1,300 parts per million in there. And that's why a person like me tuning and building the engine honestly has survived this long. You get a little piece of that. We've got over 1,400 of them, which is roughly the amount of horsepower we were putting down on those last 2 runs, ready to go out. And you can see they're all there. What's wild is that these are about 5 milliliters of fluid. Something that's very important about this is that this isn't oil that I replace after every race. You can actually see it's battle tested. I did all of my dynos on it. I raced Ken in it, and you can see a little bit of swirling in there. That's, who knows what's in that. We'll actually end up sending this oil to a lab as well for our own reasons. We've done so much work on this oil without replacing it, and it's just a testament of how quality it is. Without much delay, the next run was turning the boost up. Also launching the car, which is something that the only other time I'd done that, I blew both drive shafts. Imagine that's in the back of your mind, but that doesn't even matter because you're next to Ken Block. Now it's time to just launch the car. Here's what's very interesting. Like I was telling you about that mammal brain where you just go on off. I launched the car better than I expected because I pushed too far. What you see happen is that I go to about half throttle and I build up to about 6-8 pounds of boost, which was my intention. As the nerves got to me, I pushed the pedal in further to 75%, which as it was rising up, there was no way of stopping it, but as it was rising up, I was building boost all the way up to 20 PSI. 20 PSI is just over 1,000 wheel horsepower. So when you see that car launch that hard, that was unplanned, it wasn't intended, and I hit 1,000 horsepower on the launch. And that was one of the sickest moments of my life. It launched like as if it was on a drag strip. It launched like it had VHT. It launched like I was hooking, like my life depended on it. Here's one of the biggest moments that most people are going to be surprised by. At that moment, the car didn't bog. This car was doing just fine. I let off, and here's why. What you see happen is that the car launches, and instantly, the spike is just straight up to the heavens, 10,000 RPM instantly, and I didn't hold it in there. I was like, oh shit. I saw the moon, I saw everything. I had to let go. For half a second, I let off the pedal. And so everybody's like, oh, it's geared wrong. No, the car's fine. It was me. I launched a car at 1,000 horsepower with 1,400 horsepower on tap, and I let go. Even with letting go, I still jump into second gear, get it back up, but I still only went to about 60% throttle. And then went to third, fourth, and so on. And as you can see, I'm starting to get more and more comfortable with the car on the third run ever. Each gear, I'm giving it more and more pedal. As you go up in gear, the car's boosting harder, and I'm making even more power. Like I said, that was proof that I was getting more and more comfortable with the least amount of time possible in the car. Like, I mean, realistically, you would need a lot more time, but when you're racing somebody, you kind of expedite the process. And that's where the last run really is one of my favorite runs. The last run, something funny happens. I did exactly what I planned to do. The biggest problem of the last run of the video isn't that I'm half a second behind him. It's that I've stalled the car. I bogged the car out. And that's because I don't have any testing on how to launch the car. So what you'll see here, this time, I think that the first run, I didn't look at the logs quick enough, that the first run, I was probably around 8 PSI. So I went again for about 8 PSI, and that's where I messed up. I didn't build enough boost. I aimed for 8, and I launched the last time at 20, and you get the result I got. I didn't kill the car, thankfully, but it just made a really shitty launch. After that, though, I'm still proud of it because that's when you see my shifting get even tighter, quicker, and 100% pedal on, blip, and off. Realistically, I don't think I could have done any better, given I only had 4 races, and I was testing so much all at once. When I did the dyno, I went to 29 PSI, but when I went to race Ken, I turned it up to 36. You do those numbers backwards, that's roughly about 1,400 to the wheels, and the turbo wheel speed sensor tells you something very interesting. So if you take a look at the turbo wheel speed sensor and you look at the boost ratio of the turbo, you can go to the compressor map, a lot of really weird math, and you can find how much air that turbo is kicking out. I'm gonna let you guys interpret those numbers as you want to, but I'll show you what they are. I was logging that and the logs were perfectly fine. That turbo was kicking out almost 1,700 horsepower worth of air for a rotary. Because if you take a piston engine, it's basically, the times it by 10. So if it's kicking out 200 pounds of air, it's 2,000 horsepower. This was well above that, but a rotary uses more air for less horsepower. Kind of a weird thing that they do. Utterly insane, to say the least. And this brings me to another point. This car was so rich when I was running well into the high boost because I was trying to stay safe that I couldn't even read the air to fuel ratio. Wideband O2 sensor couldn't even tell you how rich it was because it was so rich, and that could have caused a rich misfire. There could have been something bad from that. It was simply I kind of guessed what those numbers would be, and then I just added a little bit extra fuel just to stay safe. And of course, we made it back on the trailer. The car did not leave pieces of itself, other than the cosmetics, other than the hood and the rear. The actual drivetrain, perfectly fine. I wanted you guys to see this, and like I said, it was worth waiting for because I wanted to show you the shifting, and I'll show you the first run compared to the last run side by side, and you can see the speed, the shifting. You can tell that the car's horsepower is increased, and it just shows you how much room for improvement there is, both me as a driver and really the car. Because once we get the strain gauge working on that car, it's going to be less of me and just simply pulling. And I'll show you another thing that I have that I've had since the beginning of owning the parts for this car is the pneumatic shifter. You've seen other guys doing it now, but I've had the pneumatic shifter for about 4 years now. It's way more fun to shift it manually, to be honest. And you'll see that within one shift, so from the bottom of second to the bottom of fifth, was less than 3 seconds. And that tells you that it's less than a second for power shifting each gear. So absolutely insane. But if I was trying to just simply win races and not just enjoy the insanity of the car, I would switch to the pneumatic shifter and let the car do it all for me. Well, what fun is that? That's not my style. It's all about getting connected with that car. And oh my God, can you feel the relationship building between me and it? Not only just like, oh cool, I'm building the car, but I'm actually racing it and willing to give it all. That is probably the coolest feeling about this build so far. Okay, so cool, Rob, awesome. You're talking about what could have been, back in high school, you could have tried out for college football or whatever. No, there's a reason for this, and some of you already know what this is preparing for. It's bigger than anything you've already seen. And as a result, the wild ride I'm about to take you guys on has only just started. This is the craziest way to shake down this car. I thought that that's where it ended. That's only where it begins.